look, the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, the theory of linguistic relativity, it is the philosophy of a highly eccentric individual named Benjamin Whorf. And it incorporated data and examples from separate research done by a guy named Sapir. So this video is directed towards the philosophy of Whorf. And it's not what you think it is. It's not what people say it is in the universities. And it's not what people say it is on YouTube either. This is a really strange example of a theory that's been completely divorced from the words and intentions of the author who invented it, partly just for the entertainment and edification of undergraduate students, partly, I don't know, so professors can feel there's something really profound and important in the science of linguistics itself, something more powerful than the study of culture or history, perhaps. I don't really know what motivates the people who are playing this game, but the point of this video is to show you that people are playing games, not just here on YouTube, but even in PhD programs in linguistics. The world needs to know how far we've drifted away from what the actual Sapir-Whorf hypothesis was.
So the idea that the language you speak shapes the way that you see the world is really intuitive. After all, if you know the difference between a guitar and a bass, but I don't, we're going to have a pretty different way of talking about our favorite bands.
So this is the type of seemingly profound and provocative claim that's tacked onto the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, and it's actually completely, utterly irrelevant to the real intellectual legacy and thesis that Benjamin Whorf worked so hard to set down. What was it this guy had to say? Let's jump right to the middle of it here. Let's go to a smoking gun quotation. Here you go. Oh, he believes in, quote, a world of hyperspace, a world of higher dimensions. You see that? This doesn't sound stupid and crazy to you yet? Stick around. This video is going to get stupider and crazier. As it says on the left, highlighted in yellow, Whorf called it the principle of linguistic relativity because he saw the idea as having implications similar to Einstein's principle of physical relativity. This is a mystical, transcendental, over-the-top, crazy theory. This guy really was a religious eccentric, indulging in his own strange spiritual view of life on Earth that has nothing to do with linguistics as a legitimate science, and has nothing to do even with the kinds of petty but profound questions that professors are kind of trying to inspire their undergraduate students to ask. Oh, look at this on screen. You can read the whole thing if you want to. Yes, yeah. The inner affinity of language and the cosmic order. That sounds legit to you guys? What was the original premise behind all of this pseudo-spiritual pontificating? Oh yeah, right. We could actually read his thesis. His essay actually does open with a thesis statement, as good undergraduate essays should. So, yeah, the various sciences in proliferating highly specialized languages, I suppose, to communicate their ideas, the various sciences have become mutually incomprehensible, right? And this isn't just a problem for communication between the sciences, he claims. Like, it's not just difficult for someone in chemistry to communicate with someone in physics. The problem is this is actually distorting the perception of reality by scientists themselves, and to some extent distorting the perception of reality in all of Western society in the age of the dominance of science. And this is a problem that impedes scientific progress and impedes the transformation of our society. And he is going to solve this problem with his brilliant spiritual insight into the relationship between language and the cosmic order of reality. Yeah, remember that? A world of hyperspace, of higher dimensions. He's going to talk to us about relating to higher. This is basically part of the founding of a new religion. And guess where it was published? It was published in the overtly insane Journal of Theosophy, run by a cult group created by a well-known psychic charlatan, Helena Blavatsky. If you don't believe me, look it up. Even Wikipedia will debunk this nonsense. You can read what I've put here on screen for you. yeah, it wasn't just crazy, it was also kind of racist. But hey, let's go back to our respectable YouTuber who does a respectable job of summarizing the kind of nonsense that will be on your final exam if you are right now an undergraduate student wading through the Pettydeep waters of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis as it's been, I don't know, diluted and watered down for your consumption.
The strongest version of this is usually called linguistic determinism, because it says that the way that we think isn't just influenced by our language, it's totally 100% determined by it. It's also known as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis because of a couple of important researchers who pioneered the topic, Edward Sapir and Benjamin Lee Whorf. Now, this idea raises some interesting questions. Like, if words shape how you see the world, can there be anything resembling accurate translation between languages? Or if you speak more than one language, is your worldview significantly different between them? But let's leave those for now and start with some really famous research done in the 1930s by Whorf. He studied grammatical structures from Native American languages and compared them with English and other European languages. One of the languages he looked at was Hopi, spoken in northern Arizona, and specifically how people talk about time in that language. Logically, the way your eyeballs and brain bits see color should be basically the same, whether you live in Toronto or Taipei, or whether you speak Mandarin or Mongolian. It's just biology, right? Well, to a proponent of linguistic determinism, not right. The words you have for color should totally influence what colors you're able to perceive. There's actually been a lot of research on this. It turns out that not every language has the same number of color terms.
You can see in this way the academic discipline of linguistics just turns this into a Pandora's box of unlimited Pettydeep anecdotes about things that happen to be slightly interesting about linguistic asymmetry. What was Whorf's original crazy idea? It was an idea about the relationship between the linguistic order and the cosmic order. Right? And it's completely clear in his own words, if anyone's reading his own words. And apparently nobody is. All right? And what does everyone pretend his idea was? They pretend that it's not a two-way street between a linguistic order and a cosmic order. They pretend instead that the theory of linguistic relativity was a one-way street about the linguistic order imposing itself on culture, imposing itself on politics, and imposing itself even on cognition. Now, look, Whorf didn't make up this, I don't know, highly eccentric religious worldview starting with a blank sheet of paper. If you read his writing carefully, he tells you what his sources were, right? So here you go. The author's intent matters. He's here citing Ouspensky's book, A New Model of the Universe. Who was Ouspensky? He was one of the early proponents of the peculiar new religious movement or cult group of Gurdjieff. Look, I don't know how far you want to go down the rabbit hole on this. One crazy cult group leads to another, leads to another. What does he take from Gurdjieff? You see here highlighted in yellow, part of his philosophy or worldview was undermining people's ingrained patterns of thought, right? So they have these, I don't know, mystical Zen-like moments of breakthrough or insight. All right, well, that doesn't sound too bad or too evil. As crazy cult groups go, you know, whatever. I've heard of worse. You can imagine for someone like Whorf, whose whole approach to language was talking about patterns and ingrained habits of thought and how those shape your perception of the world and the possibility of jarring you out of them to have profound insight. Whorf's view of reality was precisely about the ways in which those patterns of thought were and were not linked to the cosmic order, hyperspace, as he puts it, alternate dimensions, perception of reality, etc., etc. And he really was interested in yogic, transcendental insights. He says it himself. It's in his paper. He talks about Sanskrit and Hindu traditions of yoga. He was interested in Zen-like moments of transcendence. So whatever, you can make fun of it to some extent, you know, or you can take it for what it's worth. But what it is not is a scientific hypothesis. It has nothing to do with the science of linguistics, no matter how you define it. It has nothing to do with what it's supposed to be about in academia today. Quote, we saw in part 1 that in linguistic and mental phenomena, significant behavior, or what is the same, both behavior and significance, so far as they're interlinked, are ruled by a specific system or organization, a quote-unquote geometry, characteristic of each language. This organization is imposed from outside the narrow circle of the personal consciousness, making of that consciousness a mere puppet, whose linguistic maneuverings are held in unsensed and unbreakable bonds of pattern. So, look, it is what it is. You can regard it as the start of a new religion, or you can regard it as a crazy extension and sequel to some other religions that were already around, like namely that of Helena Blavatsky and Gurdjieff and Uspensky. That was the crowd he was rolling with, and those are the people he was trying to make a positive impression upon. It is certainly very sad to see. I mean, look here on screen. You've got Sanskrit, Hindu spirituality rolled in with the rest of it. It's certainly very sad to see that his actual hypothesis is being misrepresented as if his theory was that the U.S. government should force everyone to learn English. On the contrary, what he says here is that Western culture has gone as far as it possibly can. And, well, all right, I might as well just quote him verbatim. Quote, "The commitment to illusion has been sealed in Western Indo-European language, and the road out of illusion for the West lies through a wider understanding of language than Western Indo-European languages alone can give. This is the mantra yoga of Western consciousness, the next great step, which it is now ready to take." So he was interested in Native American languages and Asian languages precisely in shaking you out of the slumber of your monolingual ignorance so you could have this profound insight into reality. And hey, maybe for some of you, that doesn't sound too bad. In closing this video, let's come back to the issue of race and racism, which has kind of haunted this from several different angles.
The idea that your language shapes how you think was really influential for a while, but unfortunately it had some disastrous consequences, and not only in Europe. In fact, some of the most destructive linguistic policies in America arose from the idea that indigenous language communities should be replaced by civilized European languages. And those policies were really ruinous. According to the MIT Indigenous Language Initiative, of the roughly 300 Native American languages that once existed, only 165 remain, and of those, 80% have under 1,000 speakers left. I mean, there are 3 times more Hungarian speakers in the US than speakers of the most populous Native American language, Navajo. And while we're not laying all the blame for this at the feet of ideas linking language to worldview, they did make a contribution.
So this is really unfortunate. I don't know to what extent he's being honest or dishonest, but this is the exact opposite of who Benjamin Whorf was. Whorf was a kind of spiritual seeker, and he was out there trying to romanticize Native American culture. That's really what his research was doing. He was claiming, the Native Americans have a different way of perceiving time and thinking about the future, and this is reflected in their language. He was also trying to romanticize a lot of religions of East Asia. He was obviously fascinated by Hindu philosophy and to some extent Buddhist philosophy and so on. It's written all over his work. He really was a hippie spiritual seeker of his time who dabbled in linguistics and who romanticized and put on a pedestal the value of indigenous American languages. So it's really sad. It's really shameful for his legacy. Even though I've just come out and told you I regard this as kind of insane and twisted and a member of a stupid spiritual cult group, nevertheless, credit where it's due. This was not one of the evil imperialists on the wrong side of history. This was a guy who saw a lot of value in Native American languages, and he was studying them for precisely these spiritual reasons.